I think this privacy concern is overblown, honestly. We could walk around with our phones. Our phones capture a lot about us. Many times models get worse over a period of time. So we don't know whether this feedback is actually making it worse instead of making it better. At any point in time, a larger portion of queries that are done on any given day are brand new queries that have never been done before. We put in a lot of our own minds into LLMs than we do in search engines, right? And so I think we have to be concerned about that. There was a copyright case against Claude where it was discovered that they had bought and scanned many books and magazines and periodicals and other copyrighted material and used that to train their LLMs. The authors of many of these books and the publishers had sued Claude, sued Anthropic, saying that their AI was using copyrighted material. On multiple different cases, the judges ruled that the LLMs were reading the copyrighted material and were transforming it sufficiently that it would count as transformative fair use, and therefore the copyrighted material was not directly being used. This is very important because all LLMs are initially trained on a large amount of public data, and therefore this case could have had very, very high impact, far-reaching impact. So the ruling also said that Anthropic has to pay a fine. Now, interestingly, this fine was not because they used copyrighted material, where they bought the books and then scanned them, but they also downloaded copyrighted material from torrents, basically from pirated content, and they are having to pay for using that pirated content. But the amount of the fine that the judge has issued, I think there was a settlement, not the amount of fine that the judge had given. But Anthropic reached a settlement with the publishers where they're paying a very nominal amount per book that they got that was not bought but downloaded, and they're settling the case. So this is a huge win for any AI provider because it says that the process of training the LLM is transformative, and therefore the intelligence that the LLM has created is fair use, and you can train it, right? Copyright law in most other countries is very similar, and therefore we would expect to see similar rulings across the world. This is a very good ruling from a future of intelligence perspective. Obviously, any human trains their intelligence by reading these books, assimilating it, and so on. And if the ruling had gone the other way, saying that, hey, an LLM should not use this kind of material to train, then that means that LLMs would be substantially poorer from an intelligence perspective because they can't train on the large corpus of content that humanity has already developed. So I think this will be a very strong precedent for any kind of copyright case anywhere else in the world. And most other places, the publishers are not as strong as the publishers are in the US. And therefore, it will be harder for them to come up with reasons why it should be different from the US ruling. So that way, this is great for folks who want to have machine intelligence develop faster and go further. I think that's unlikely. And the reason that it's unlikely is because the court has ruled that it is transformative fair use. So when does a copyright holder have to be paid? When there is a substantial use of their content in a new form, right, or in a new medium or whatever, right? So what that means is that it has to be the same content that was created that has to be delivered by the new medium and the new thing, right? So for example, if I have a piece of music and it's being played in a movie, that is still considered to be substantive use, so you have to pay for it, right? But let's say I'm making a parody or I'm doing something else, right, where the intent of it is not to use this or not to really bring this up, right? Then it's considered to be fair use, and in fair use, you don't have to pay the copyright holder. So because the court has ruled that this is transformative, and therefore the creators of the IP with which the LLMs are being trained will not have to be compensated by and large. Now, if it comes out that the LLMs are duplicating exactly the content that it was trained on, and that is being used from a commercial perspective and not from a transformative perspective, then they will get into trouble and they may need to pay. But that used to happen earlier. Now they put safeguards around that happening. So that will happen less and less as we go forward. So very unlikely that creators will get compensation from the LLM vendors, except when an LLM vendor is paying to buy a particular data set or buy a particular piece of work in order to use that in their training data. Good question. So if you go back to the competitive advantage that Google had, it was actually the same thing. Because even at any point in time, a larger portion of queries that are done on any given day are brand new queries that have never been done before. And a large percentage of queries that are done from search perspective any given day have been done very, very few times before, right? So one of the biggest innovations that Google did was to fold in user feedback, passive user feedback, into search. What they did was, let's say you click on the first result and you go and you don't come back to that search query. That means that that result was good. Let's say you click on that search query, went, but came back immediately and clicked on the second search query. That means that the first search result did not satisfy your need, right? Which means that the first search result should probably be downranked. And let's say now you click the second search result, went, and you didn't come back. That means probably the second search result was a better fit for your query, and so on, right? So this actually is a very powerful feedback mechanism for Google, and this is something that somebody else cannot beat, because the tail queries, where there are very few queries, are the ones where somebody is searching and they're looking to figure out what they want, and this data is very, very critical for Google to be able to do the ranking well. So this is 25-year-old technology, right? Maybe longer. Now, from a ChatGPT perspective, from a Anthropic Claude perspective, whoever else, right? When the AI is giving you results, being able to take that feedback both passively in terms of are you asking any further questions, or actively in the form of a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or asking for feedback or asking you to pick within an A/B test, are all very critical ways for the AI to improve. So definitely today, given the pace at which all of these AIs are evolving, you and me are participants in improving the data that these LLMs have and the results that they serve out. This is much more nuanced than we can get to, because there are probably lots of challenges around geography. Europe traditionally has very different policies compared from a baseline perspective than the US, and it all probably also has to do with what kind of data is actually useful for training versus what kind of data is not so useful for training, right? And it also has to do with the fact that what other training data they have that is more high quality than this, therefore more useful for training. And there are there is a law of diminishing returns in terms of how much of this user-based feedback training is going to make the model better or worse. Because one of the things that people noticed, and I don't know whether they use it, so we don't know because it's not disclosed, is that many times models get worse over a period of time. So a model, when it's launched, feels better. Same model later feels worse. So we don't know whether this feedback is actually making it worse instead of making it better, right? So I think they must be experimenting with this. I don't think we should see it as a final change that they are making. It may be that they got the sense that from a regulatory standpoint, it's better that they don't have a bunch of this data, so somebody cannot come and try to get it from them, a government or otherwise, right? But we are in very shifting sands at this moment. I don't think there are any fixed things that opt in is the right thing or opt out is the right thing, or I don't think that's been figured out yet. So we'll have to get there. I think this privacy concern is overblown, honestly. We walk around with our phones. Our phones capture a lot about us, our conversations, chats, locations, audio, everything, right? Our phones and our devices already capture a shit ton about us. Uh, in this specific case, I think it's being very clear that this is for training, and if you're opting into it, then of course they cannot do the training piecemeal, right? It will be very hard for them to wire it up for somebody to delete some part of the training data and stuff like that. It'll be crazy. So I think that from that perspective, privacy concerns uh, have to be are not that high. There is a different aspect of privacy which is a challenge, which is that as an individual, when I talk to a doctor or a therapist, a lawyer, I expect to have a certain degree of confidentiality. Right? Now, when I use an LLM for the same purpose and have that conversation, can that be used as evidence? Can that be held against me? Are things that we don't have at the moment. The answer is yes, they can be used against you, which is similar to a Google search, right? And so many people. We've seen the news where some idiot kills somebody in his family, and there's a Google search on how do you murder somebody, and how do you dispose of the body, and stuff like that, right? So obviously that can be used in a court as evidence against you. It is not privileged in any way, shape, form. Right? Now we are using computers for many things, but we have not used computers as for therapy and things like that. Just as a nuance, right? Let's say I was connecting on my laptop to a therapist and I was having a conversation with my therapist. That conversation would be privileged, and it would not be possible for that to be submitted as evidence, even though it's on my computer, even if there's a copy, even if there's a recording. But a similar conversation with an LLM, which I might treat as therapy, may not be considered to be privileged, right? So from that context, we put in a lot of our own minds into LLMs than we do in search engines, right? And so I think we have to be concerned about that, and I think Anthropic or OpenAI are also concerned from that perspective of how it could be potentially misused. But these are things that nobody has figured out yet. Confidentiality in place with a lawyer or with a therapist or with a doctor, and those conversations, unless they're going to be illegal or harmful or something like that, they cannot be reported to someone else, right? Now, when we think about an LLM, I might be using an LLM for that purpose, and therefore, when I'm using an LLM for that purpose, does that mean that that conversation becomes privileged? Today, the answer is no, because LLM does not have that privilege, right? But in my opinion, I think that if we look at a functional definition of what the user is using it for, then it may well be seen that if I'm functionally using it for therapy, if I'm asking it questions like I would a therapist, if I'm taking the responses like I would from a therapist, if I'm doing that, and if that's the kind of a relationship that I'm building with that LLM, then we have to look at it as if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then it is a duck, right? So even though the LLM is not a conscious intelligence human who is giving me that the answers that I would seek from a therapist or a priest or a doctor, maybe functionally it is like that. Therefore, functionally that conversation may become privileged or may become confidential, and I think that's a perspective that will have to be tested in court at some point in time. In the past also, we have had a lot of challenges in terms of defining what is consciousness, what is intelligence. We don't have good definitions for these. Right? It's more of a I know it when I see it kind of a thing when it comes to consciousness and intelligence. And even when it comes to animals, we don't know which animals are conscious, which animals are not conscious. How do we define whether an animal is conscious or not? How do we define whether a plant is conscious or not? And so on. And same with intelligence. We really don't know how to define it. And intelligence is less challenging than consciousness, because we have in the past said, hey, this is intelligence, this is intelligence, this is intelligence. And as soon as a machine is able to do it better than a human, we say, oh, that's not intelligence, right? And then we start saying, what is creativity? And when a machine is able to do that, then we say, oh, that's not creativity. Right? It has to be something beyond that, right? So this is similar to an argument that's made called God of the gaps, right? When people were trying to define what is God, and somebody would say, how lightning comes in the sky, that is God, or how we are all pulled towards the earth, that is God, and so on, right? And at each point, science pushes that boundary of what can be explained further and further, until right now, very few things are inexplicable, and those things are God. And so, similar kind of a thing has been happening with both intelligence and consciousness, and the boundary keeps getting pushed. My opinion is more derived from the Buddhist school of thought, where Gautama Buddha basically says that these are all empty, and empty in the sense that it is like for those of you who know computer science, there are objects, and the objects have pointers to something, right? And so the object itself is empty. There is nothing there. It's just a set of pointers to something else in the real world, perhaps, right? And so what Buddha said is consciousness is empty, which is that it is just fabricated. There is no there, right? And similarly, intelligence is, in my opinion, just a set of operations, mathematical or otherwise, that happen. And there's a bit of randomness there, which leads to new things or interpolation between things, or a bunch of different operators that we can do to get there, right? And today, in my opinion, the intelligence that LLMs are providing, both specialized intelligence and generalized intelligence, is what is true intelligence that humans exhibit as well. Right? And soon there are going to be tests of intelligence that LLMs can pass, which no human can pass. We're already almost there, right? Then when we come to creativity, already we see different types of creativity being exhibited. Like last year or 18 months ago, if somebody had said, hey, can AI create music, it was very niche. Very, very few people knew about that. Today, Sono.ai is like creating large pieces of music which sound incredible, right? There's no way you would know that it's done by AI. And it takes like a few seconds to create large amounts of music. So that creativity is also already there, right? And now when we look at consciousness, we don't have a good definition of consciousness. Different people define it different ways, and part of the problem is that you're trying to define what is your own consciousness, and how it feels to you, which is very subjective, and so on. Right? And there are very, very technical definitions of consciousness, and in those definitions of consciousness, it's not even clear whether those definitions fit something that is real and solid, or whether it's describing a process. Right? So some people, including from a Buddhist school of thought, think that consciousness is a process and not a thing. So now when it's a process, then is that process being done in wetware, which is the brain and on top of neurons, or is that process being done on top of hardware and silicon in the form of programming, right? We don't know yet to be able to make that fine difference. But again, my take on this is that intelligence is a process, intelligence is a construct. Same way, consciousness is a process, consciousness is a construct. We cannot find a consciousness in our bodies, in our will, because it's a process. And similarly, if the same process runs in hardware and silicon in the form of software, then that will also exhibit all the characteristics of consciousness. And we're going to find it hard to differentiate between them. It's just that the substrate is different. So I don't know whether you remember, but there was a craze. This happened more in the US than in India. There was a craze to buy pet rocks, right? You literally buy rocks and you treat them as a pet. People get attached to all kinds of things. Humans get attached to their cars, and if somebody hits your car, it's like a personal damage has happened, right? So we get attached to all kinds of things. We make our egos bigger to include all our possessions. Uh, for many people, their pets are like their children. And one could argue that if somebody's spending, I don't know, 1 lakh on a pet, that's just insane, right? And I could argue that, right? Saying that, like, what are you doing, right? It's not human, right? So where do you draw the line? And humans have become attached to so many things across history. Humans have become addicted to so many things in history, and human relationships have undergone many changes because of that. So even if you go 2000 years ago, you will find that all these books are spoiling people, all these stories are spoiling people, all these plays are spoiling people. And 100 years ago, it was like these newspapers are spoiling people, these movies are spoiling people, these TV shows are spoiling people. So that's a never-ending thing where every generation thinks that the next generation has gone too far. And therefore, any new technology, when it comes up, obviously mobile phones have a very big impact in human to human interaction. It's reduced it in some ways and it's increased it in other ways. Today, kids play Minecraft or Roblox at a young age, and they might be playing with kids who are on the other side of the planet, right? And they're building relationships which are not possible even just 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? So on the one hand, individual interpersonal relationships seem to be going down. On the other hand, relationships are being built with people with similar interests but across the world, right? It's crazy. We live in strange times, right? I might not know my neighbor, but I might be friends with somebody across the world. Now, I think when we look at a different trend of alcohol consumption, in the US especially, alcohol consumption has had a very big pushback, and a lot of people are now not having alcohol anymore, and that's literally leading to interesting things like you have a party and the amount of alcohol used in that party is down incredibly significantly from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? And this is not a trend that people saw coming, right? And that changes social dynamics in a place like the US, where when somebody goes out, they expect to have drinks. So, right? Will mobile phones suffer the same thing, where it will become socially not okay to use a cell phone in public, or you to use a cell phone when you're with other people, right? It's possible, right? That kind of a thing can happen. Yeah, one more angle that comes to mind. I read this tweet, I think, where somebody was saying that 200 years ago, when we were all part of small tribes or small villages or small groups, 200 people, 300 people at most, right? Each of us would have a list of people that we would talk to on a daily basis: a great grandfather, a grandmother, a grand aunt, cousin, nephew, neighbor, distant neighbor, so many people that we would talk to on a daily basis, right? And so when I get into a relationship in that kind of a context, I would have different people to talk to for different problems in my life or different things in my life. And what I would talk to with my spouse would be only a subset of all the things that I would speak about with that person, right? And today, what has happened is we've come to a situation where we are a nuclear family. We are in a different city from where we grew up. We have very surface level friends, and when that happens, we bring all our problems, all our thoughts, all our conversations to this one person, and this one person is not well equipped to deal with all that wide range of problems, right? So this is a transformation that has happened in society in the last 100 years. And as families have become nuclearized, as communities have become more and more isolated, and COVID really created much more isolation, suddenly the person in front of you has to deal with an entire set of category of things which they may not be the right person to deal with, right? On an everyday basis, 24/7. Now, if you think about it from that kind of a context, then when AI comes in, am I using AI for the 90% of things which, in a historical context, evolutionary context, I would not have used my spouse or whoever with, but I would have used the broader community. And I'm using AI for that broader community support instead of a real community, or bringing it to this one person in front of me, right? In that kind of a situation, maybe it is good, right? But in another situation, all those relationships are not happening. If all those relationships are not happening, am I becoming dependent on the LLM to mediate that for me? Or is that improving my skill of having that conversation? Because definitely using LLMs has improved my skill at dealing with people, right? Because in a tricky situation, I'm able to lean on an LLM to say, hey, this is what happened. What did I do wrong? What can I do better? How can I make this move forward, and so on, right? And so I can become more skilled at dealing with people, right? So maybe that makes my relationships stronger, even though they are fewer in number, right? And a lot of us, and this again goes back to Buddhism, a lot of us basically are spending too much time in our heads with the same thought rattling around 80,000 times a day. Now, can you put that thought to rest? And historically, evolutionarily, the way that thought would be put to rest was to go to talk to someone and have that conversation and get it out, right? And once it's out, then you can move on with your life. Now, is that kind of a thing what will happen with LLMs, where more and more of those random things go out, and therefore they settle down, and then the conversations that I have with real people can be more intense, deeper, create more engagement, be more enriching, and so on, right? And that's also a possibility, right? Because at the end of the day, there have always been people who wanted to be loners. I was reading a tweet where somebody wrote that that person's grandfather took a posting in a lighthouse that was offshore, which meant that they would be in that posting in that lighthouse alone for months at a time without seeing a single human. And they wanted that, right? Because that person was an aspiring scientist and they were doing some research, and they wanted that time alone to be able to do that research. So there are people like that. There have always been people like that. Now, is that a bad thing? I don't know. It's like a season, right? Maybe you go through that and maybe you're like, okay, I'm done with that now. I want to be with people, or vice versa. So it may not be a totally bad thing. If more people become dependent on AI, if that is taking them away from a dependence on, let's say, alcohol or cigarettes or whatever else, I would say that's a good thing, because those things are actively harmful from a physical perspective. Right? Now, will these LLMs be good for them or bad for them? I would hope that these LLMs can be good for them in terms of helping them think through different things, look at different perspectives, give them different role plays that they can do, give them more confidence, make them think better and stuff like that. In the interim, will there be things that happen that are bad? 100%, right? Any technology, any increased access to information, or any increased access to things, right, always creates danger as well. Right? And simple example is the moment that somebody could go and look up instructions for murdering people or instructions for suicide, then automatically, like, more people will do that, right? And when they do that, there are harmful consequences. And the same way, somebody is going to use LLMs to be their therapist, and but it leads them down the wrong path, because it's not really a therapist, and so they might go along that wrong path further than they would otherwise. But we also have to see that these people may have been in bad shape anyway, and they may have been going down the wrong path anyway. Right? We know that there is epidemic of mental health challenges, and people are not getting enough mental health support or self-care and things like that, right? So on the balance, does the positive impact outweigh the negative, is how we have to look at it. And I think the jury's out. We probably don't even have good ways to measure whether that impact is happening, how it's happening, can it happen better, and so on and so forth. When we look at trust from a technology standpoint, there have always been skeptics, and there have always been people who push the technology and its boundaries. When we look at science fiction, there's always books that talk about how some technology has been used for positive outcomes, and there are books that have been written that warn about the perils of using technology. Right? Whether we look at the Greek human who dared to put on wings and fly too close to the sun, and because of that he crashed down on Earth and died. And that's a warning about technology that is too advanced for humans to use, and humans need to be more careful with. Right? And so we always have these two sides in fighting it out. And I think the last time that this question came up was in genetic engineering, where genetic engineering can cause potentially selection of certain traits, certain types of things. Does it lead to over selection? Does it lead to a reduction in diversity? Does it lead to destroying certain kinds of populations? Was a real fear, was and is, continues to be a real fear. And before that, when we look at it, obviously the nuclear bomb was a point when it was a lot of people, including the top physicists of the era, felt that science had gone too far, and now it had created a weapon that could destroy the entire planet many times over. And so if you think about it in that context, then is AI more or less dangerous than genetic engineering or nuclear bombs, right? And at least for me, nuclear bombs seem more scary than this AI as it exists today, right? But there has been a very dystopian set of folks who have been very, very scared of AI. And those folks have been pushing that narrative for like 15, 20 years now, maybe 15 years now. And that narrative is where a lot of these fears stem from. As with anything else, AI is a technology that has to be used with guardrails. When you use software for banking, you have guardrails. You look and see whether, hey, this person got the right amount of interest, or the withdrawal and the credits add up so that the balance is correct. So you have checks and balances in place to make sure that whatever technology you're using is used in the right way. Even before the current Gen AI wave, if you had algorithms running to score lenders or borrowers for lenders to serve them, there are safeguards in place where you have to show whether your algorithms are fair. Right? Your algorithm may have a inadvertent bias, right? And that should not be there, right? So guardrails are in place, right? So now, as an individual, when I start using any new technology, whether it's my phone, whether it's social media, or whether it's YouTube or anything else, right? Any of these things can be addictive, can be harmful for mental health. I think it is very clear now that teenage social media use, especially Instagram and things like that, have contributed a lot to the deteriorating mental health of teenagers, especially young women. All of these folks already use AI, already use ML to influence people. Right? So when it comes to Gen AI, it is suddenly like creating a different level of power for individuals as well. And so the way I look at it is, individuals having more power, hopefully used responsibly, is better for society at large. It has to be with guardrails, it has to be channeled. How do we make sure that this intelligence is serving the people rather than specific interests? I think China is in the lead there. they've said that models have to be open, and therefore you can see what is there. Number two, they are pushing for open data as well, which means what was the data used to train the model, that also has to be open. And so in the future, we will be able to hopefully see how the model thinks, right? Not just what is the output. And an example of something in this line is that I think the Saudi government launched a model, one of their companies called Humain, HUMAIN, launched this model, which is tuned to Islamic cultural practices and Islamic law and Islamic legal principles and stuff like that, right? And so therefore there the statement is that, hey, a model trained on Western American culture may not be appropriate somewhere else. And so we will likely see more of that kind of thing, where a government is saying, and a government is of the people, by the people, and hopefully, doing the right thing for the people, is saying that, hey, this LLM encodes more of our culture, our norms, our laws, our practices, and people should have a choice of which one to use. And so I may want to use a Western LLM for something, Chinese LLM for something else, Indian LLM for something else, or forget even countries. I can pick an LLM which is, more scientific reasoning kind of LLM, or I might pick an LLM which is more artsy and culturally more rich, but not so necessarily so rational, or whatever else, right? So I think that choice has to be there for people, and people will be empowered, and we have to learn how to use that power responsibly in order to progress humanity, right? And everything will evolve around this. How we use it will depend on what we trust, who we trust, and that's where the open source approach that the Chinese government is taking, where the weights are open, the data is open, the training is open, then that will engender much more trust than a closed model.